Coming up next on KPBS Evening Edition, Occupy San Diego stages a protest at the port. We'll examine whether fewer protesters means the movement is losing steam or just headed in another direction.
And find out which Republican assemblyman in San Diego says he doesn't believe schools are underfunded and he won't support an initiative to raise taxes. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Joanne Farian.
And I'm Dwayne Brown.
Occupy Wall Street became Occupy the Waterfront today, up and down the West Coast, as protesters tried to shut down ports.
San Diego was one of the sites. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr has the story.
Occupy San Diego protesters took part in a national movement today in an attempt to shut down ports along the West Coast. Locally, protesters occupied the entrances to the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal, delaying cargo trucks and backing up traffic.
The ports are really indicative of Wall Street right on the waterfront. You know, Goldman Sachs and SSG and the few companies that control all the imports coming into the country, they have it made offshore with really cheap labor. Then they bring their cheap goods in through the port. They don't want to pay union wages anymore. They're trying to break the unions, whether it's the ILWU or the truckers that are right now independent and aren't allowed to unionize.
What's the reaction?
Yes, I'm bothered. Of course I'm bothered. But what can I do? I have to show my patience. But I do support people in general. I'm sure they have a reason for them to be out here.
We welcome the protesters exercising their free speech right. It's their right to do so. We certainly support that. At the same time, we want our 99%ers, our workers, to be able to carry on their work and do the job that they're hired to do and do a job that really helps our region.
4 people were arrested during this morning's protest, but the turnout was nothing like the first demonstrations a few months ago. In a few moments, we'll be talking about the movement's future.
3 years after a deadly military jet crash in University City, a federal judge is hearing arguments in a lawsuit. 2 women and 2 children were killed when a Marine Corps jet crashed into their home. The Corps says the plane suffered mechanical failure and the pilot made a series of bad decisions that led to the crash. The family of the victims is now suing the Marine Corps in a non-jury trial. It's expected to conclude tomorrow.
The San Diego City Council has 8 committees dealing with a variety of issues, but not one of them has been focused on creating jobs. That's until today. The council voted to create a 9th committee, an economic development committee. Its mission will be to help local businesses create jobs and find ways to reduce government red tape. Councilwoman Sherry Leitner will be the chair of the new committee. Its first meeting will be at the end of next month.
Some water customers in the city of San Diego have been complaining about its new billing system. It was launched in July, and some customers say they've been double billed or not billed at all. Kelly Thornton with Investigative News Source has been following this story. She joins us from the KPBS News Center. So, Kelly, is this water billing system a user problem or an agency problem?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. I think the city would tell you that it's a new system that customers just need to get used to. But I think a lot of customers, very angry customers who've had their water shut off, would say that the system was not user-friendly, very difficult. They were trying to make payments and even had email confirmation that they made a payment, and yet they still had their water shut off. So clearly there's a big problem there.
So in terms of paying, are we talking about paying by mail or paying online? What seems to be the issue?
Well, I think what's happening is a lot of people are getting bills that aren't correct or getting no bills, and when they're trying to make a payment online or through auto pay, their payments are either not posting to their accounts, and so they're not showing that they've paid it, and then they're getting their water shut off, or many, many different scenarios with billing, overbilled, underbilled, etc. So it's just kind of a big headache for customers.
And how is the Public Utility Department addressing this?
Well, they have opened up, or they plan to open up call centers or payment centers where people can come in and make payments in person, 25 more. They're also adding 12 customer service representatives on a temporary basis to handle the deluge of phone calls so that people don't have to sit on hold for long periods of time or not get through. And they're going to create a pay-by-phone option by credit card. So hopefully these things will help people get their bills paid and not have their water shut off within about 60 to 90 days.
60 to 90 days. Thank you. Reporter Kelly Thornton with the investigative news source. So is the Occupy movement losing some steam? Joanne is looking into that question with her guests at the Evening Edition Roundtable.
As we just told you, Occupy protesters staged another demonstration today near the Port of San Diego. What began 3 months ago as a peaceful and crowded march through downtown San Diego in early October has diminished to pockets of protesters at the Civic Center Plaza. Police have arrested more than 130 people since the occupation began. Demonstrators are no longer allowed to have tents or sleeping bags at the plaza, and with cold weather setting in, numbers appear to be dwindling. Is the movement losing momentum, or is it changing direction? Joining me now is Miro Kopik, a professor of marketing at San Diego State School of Business. Thank you, Professor, for being here.
Thank you, Joanne.
So I want to begin with a quote. You were quoted in the San Francisco Chronicle back in October with regard to the movement, and you said any corporate brand stands for something, whereas they don't stand, speaking about the movement, for anything specific. In 2, 4, 5 weeks, when it gets really cold, if they don't have a reason for being, even the most ardent people are going to go home. Did that happen?
Well, it seems to be happening for the great masses. It hasn't happened really for those core demonstrators who are really there for the core principle of making change and hopefully for the better for society. But in really building momentum, they're really missing a huge opportunity.
What role do you think police and city governments have had in terms of sort of taking some of the momentum away and being able to shut down at least the physical demonstrations?
Well, I think most cities and most police forces gave the movement initially a lot of latitude, because as they talk about being part of the 99%, it truly was a movement of a lot of disparate audiences, from unions to senior executives who've been unemployed, to students, and they were looking to find their voice. And there was no politician in the country that would kind of squelch that at the very beginning. As they failed to find a clear focus message of what they were focusing on, whether it's the financial services debacle or corporate greed or whatever the different messages are, governments lost patience. And at some point there's safety issues. It starts bringing in people that may not be part of the original movement, and they needed to clean that out.
So we see numbers getting smaller, but does that, demonstrations getting smaller, but does it necessarily mean that the movement, the message, the discussion is diminishing? Or is that still able to gain momentum, at least in the public discourse?
Well, the discussion will continue regardless. It'll continue into the 2012 political cycle. It's being discussed by both parties from different perspectives. The thing is, does the movement want to have a voice in that discourse? And that's going to be the major issue in the upcoming handful of months. And without a clear focused message, like the Tea Party did for the last election cycle, they could find themselves an irrelevant part of the conversation.
Because the Tea Party, they have had a tremendous impact on politics. Some have argued they've really taken over the Republican Party. How have they managed to do that?
Well, they managed it by driving two very core, simple, easy to understand messages that really piggyback on voter discontent. Number one is they don't want to have higher taxes. They don't want to have tax increases. They want lower taxes, and they want less government interference. And as kind of the corollary for the Occupy movement, they don't want the greater 99 paying higher taxes. They want that 1% paying higher taxes. There's a lot of similarities, just different perspective, but the Tea Party movement was so focused on these two key planks that allowed them to resonate not only with Republicans, but also independents. Independents who felt a little bit betrayed by the election of Barack Obama. They said there was a lack of focus. They jumped on that, and that was able to get them the kind of voice that they received. But, as people looked at it, if people actually go back to the early part of the Tea Party movement, there were some very intriguing candidates that weren't passing public scrutiny. So they still struggled initially, but they've kind of found their focus in these two messages.
You said something really interesting about whether or not the Occupy movement, whether they want to be part of that political discussion. Because I've read, too, probably some of the same stories where some of these demonstrators are quoted as saying, we don't want to become a political party. We don't want that. Aren't they going to have to be that if they want change?
I think in today's political structure, there isn't a lot of opportunity to do otherwise. And I'm not a government professor, but certainly third parties have had some impact on national election. You could look at Ross Perot when he ran against George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton. He really had impact in the election, but he couldn't win. It's very difficult for third-party movements unless they become a greater part of the dialogue to really have an impact, and that's going to be an issue with Occupy.
Finally, before we go, I know a lot of us had speculated, as you did in the San Francisco Chronicle back in October, whether or not San Diego was necessarily a protest kind of town. What kind of numbers could they get out? Were you surprised? First of all, it began with 1,500, and that it's still going here in this city?
I think San Diego, like any major urban area, has a lot of people with a lot of diversity of opinions. So it doesn't surprise me that it was big. I know people consider San Diego as a little bit more laid back, a surfer culture. However, it is a vibrant city with a lot of diverse ideas, and it's going to continue to have a core group of Occupy protesters like all the major cities are. And if they can actually link together with something positive to focus on, I think they could be a relevant movement. But that's the clock is ticking.
Professor Kopech, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Joanne.
A San Diego landmark could soon be the site of new housing, but a longtime San Diego employer doesn't want housing there. The fight over Fat City, coming up in just a moment. And is this sign a historic landmark or not? We'll tell you about that debate, too. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next NewsHour, Congress wrestles with an extension of the payroll tax cut. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
American Masters presents
every kind of visual treat you can imagine.
Charles and Ray Eames, the architect and the painter who became the top husband and wife design team of the 20th century. From furniture,
the Eames chair,
to filmmaking.
The concept is mind-blowing.
They thought outside the box before anyone even knew there was a box.
Charles and Ray Eames.
A happy, modern couple absorbed in their work.
Enjoy Eames on American Masters.
December 19th at 10, only on KPBS.
The American people have named PBS
the most trusted source of news and public affairs for the 8th year in a row. Trust. The American people have spoken.
Thank you.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Irwin Jacobs and by
Development in downtown San Diego is a common sight, but one project on the northern edge of Little Italy is stirring up some controversy. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr has the story from our Biz Tech desk.
Condos in Little Italy have been a hot commodity in recent years, and one local property owner would like to cash in on the trend. But there's a problem, and it has to do with a longtime San Diego company located in the neighborhood. The Fat City restaurant opened on the corner of Hawthorne Street and Pacific Highway in Little Italy in the 1970s. Today, a Denny's restaurant occupies the space, but the neon Fat City sign still clings to the pink 1940s Art Deco building. The sign would also be incorporated into the planned 232-apartment Fat City Lofts project architect Jonathan Siegel and developer Garth Erdesy would like to build. Siegel says it would welcome visitors to the neighborhood.
Because this is kind of a dead zone right now, and it's really important that this blighted area, which is the gateway into downtown San Diego from the airport, which I don't know how many millions of people come through, is a symbol of the prosperity and the good nature and the good news that downtown redevelopment's bringing.
But not everyone believes the project will serve as a welcome mat. Across the street, about 100 feet away from Fat City, sits Solar Turbines, which has been in the neighborhood for more than 80 years.
The company manufactures gas turbine parts at the plant. Solar says putting a residential building so close to it could trigger increased environmental reviews that may slow down or deny permits the company needs. And it says any impact to its business could affect the 1,800 people who work at the plant. So far, the company has found support for its efforts to stop the Fat City Lofts project. The Labor Council, the San Diego Chamber of Commerce, local officials, and Congressman Brian Bilbray have all written letters opposing the project. The developers have said they will only rent, not sell the lofts, so that Solar doesn't have to deal with the homeowners association. And they say they'll make sure people know what they're getting into when they sign a lease. But Robert Card says it's not that simple. He's the county's air pollution control officer. He says Solar legally emits certain pollutants that may not bother someone passing through. But he says the emissions could be irritating to someone who lives nearby and is constantly exposed to them.
Risk increases the closer you get to a source of air pollution. It's like a campfire. Campfires are great unless you're standing in the smoke plume. It's very irritating, not good for you.
Card says even if residents agree not to complain, they could always call in an anonymous complaint that his office would be obligated to follow up on. But the developers say Solar is overreacting. They don't believe the location is harmful, and they point out the site was zoned as mixed-use residential by the city. Developer Garth Erdesy says there's a huge demand for the apartments.
Right now, residential is the highest and best use of this site and probably most sites in the downtown area like this. It's got great access to public transit. You can walk to dinner over in Little Italy. If you worked at Solar Turbines, you'd have a really short commute, for example.
But Solar President Jim Umpleby says the property's zoning isn't the only thing the city should consider.
Yeah, the latest document that was developed was the city's general plan. And that plan does clearly call for a buffer between industrial lands and residential housing.
Umpleby says there's nothing the developers can do that would make Solar okay with building apartments at Fat City. The developers say they believe they have a right to build their project and don't plan on backing down. The Center City Development Corporation will have the final say on the Fat City Loft sometime in January. Developers say they'll go to court if their project gets denied.
That report from Katie Orr. You can follow our coverage of the Fat City development controversy on our website, kpbs.org. There's also a fight brewing over an old sign on the side of the California Theater downtown. The sign for the Caliente racetrack has been there since the 1960s. The Save Our Heritage organization says that makes it part of San Diego's cultural history. The city planning department doesn't agree, though. It's approved a request to paint over the old sign and replace it with a beer ad. Negotiations for the ad currently underway. More changes for the Aztecs. 14 other athletic programs at San Diego State University will join the Big West Conference in 2013. But lacrosse, swimming, track and field teams won't be a part of the league. SDSU hopes to garner more national television opportunities for its men's basketball team. Athletic officials say moving to the West Conference would save a bundle on travel costs and boost recruiting. The football team is moving to the Big East in 2013.
Last week, Governor Jerry Brown filed a ballot initiative with the Attorney General that would increase the state sales tax and increase income taxes for the wealthy. The governor said he was bypassing the legislature and going directly to the voters because he did not want to get bogged down in partisan gridlock. Joining me now to talk about where he stands on this initiative is Assemblymember Brian Jones. He's a Republican representing the 77th District, encompassing much of East County, including Santee and La Mesa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
So let's start off. Where do you stand on this tax initiative?
Well, I'm kind of anxious for the governor to bring it to a vote of the people. I think they're going to vote no. The voters statewide resoundingly over the last several elections have said no to new taxes statewide. And I think they're going to say no one more time.
Are you going to say no? Would you
I'm
vote
absolutely going to say no, and I'm going to encourage everybody to say no. But I want the governor to bring it to a vote so he can be convinced finally that Californians are tired of being taxed. We're already taxed as one of the highest rates in the country, and he needs to hear loud and clear from the voters that they don't want any more taxes.
Although this money would be earmarked for education, and it doesn't matter what study you look at, California spends less per pupil on education than the national average. How does that make you feel, knowing that the state spends less on education?
Well, I I haven't seen that statistic, so I can't answer to it specifically.
It's government statistics, state statistics, national statistics. Ever since Prop 13 passed back in 1978, we've seen a steady decline in terms of what's spent on education.
Okay, well, and I'll review those statistics and confirm that per pupil, I can't believe that we're one of the lowest in the country. But even if that's true, I know that in California, charter schools even spend less per pupil than traditional public schools do, and I think statewide they're performing at a higher rate than the regular public schools. So even though a charter school is a public school.
So do you think we need more money for education?
Absolutely not. I think that it's a matter of making priorities. I think when a politician tells you their number one priority is, in this example, public education, and we need to raise taxes to fund public education, what that politician is really telling you is public education is their last priority. They're going to fund everything else first and then come back to the voters to say, all right, now that we've spent money on everything else, education, oh, we forgot about education. Now we need to raise your taxes to pay for education. Well, why not fund education first and then all the other stuff, unsustainable pensions, welfare. We've got one of the most generous welfare systems in the country. Why not make some changes there and fund education first?
So the governor has also said he wants to go to the people because he doesn't want to bring this to legislators because of the partisan politics, gridlock. And in fact, there was a field poll, results came out last week. Only 22% of Californians really think that their assemblymen are doing a good job.
I'd like to meet those 22 people that think we're doing a good job.
So how does that make you feel?
Well, I think in response to the quote from Brown that he wants to avoid the partisan gridlock, the other quote that he said is that Republicans failed to provide the 4 votes necessary to put it on the ballot through the legislature. What's a more accurate statement is Governor Brown failed to negotiate in good faith with the Republicans to get some of the Republican ideas on the ballot at the same time. Governor Brown is very disciplined and very good with his message in trying to place the blame on the Republicans in this issue. The problem is he's not, we just want the voters to be able to vote on some other issues as well. He's not willing to let the voters vote on some of the other issues that we think are important.
Isn't this sort of the classic example of what he's talking about and why so many voters are unhappy? It just becomes down to he said and she said.
Oh, I don't think it's a he said, she said. You can go back and look through the news articles, the editorials. When the Republicans came through the leadership of the Senate, the Republicans came to Jerry Brown with a package of reforms that we wanted statewide, and that we can rehash that or look it up. But he didn't want to address any of those reforms to state government that we thought was important. All he wants is for the voters to vote on the taxes. So now he's going to get his way, and he's going to get to hear what the voters have to say about it.
Before we go, I want to put you on the record with Occupy San Diego, this whole Occupy movement. Yes or no? Do you support this movement?
I knew you were going to ask me because you asked Assemblyman Rueso the same question. The best answer I can come up with is I support parts of it. But there's a lot of it I don't support. I support the First Amendment and the right to peacefully assemble. I do not support destruction of private property, public property, and I don't support some of the foul things that they're doing. But
okay, Assemblyman Jones, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we will continue our look at Crawford High School students trying to save their school. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Tuesday at 10 on KPBS.
Hi, I'm Elsa Sevilla. If you find yourself hearing about a great program on KPBS after it's already aired, we have a solution. Get notified about your favorite TV programs on KPBS before they air by subscribing to the TV Highlights email alert. This daily email will feature the best programs coming up right here on KPBS TV, so you can make a date to tune in or plan to record it. It's easy to register. Just go to kpbs.org/alerts.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. Last week, we told you about the San Diego Unified School District's proposal to eliminate Crawford High School's small schools model to save money. The school is divided into 4 smaller campuses. Crawford students protested the proposal at a board meeting last week. This next video comes from our partners from the Media Arts Center's Teen Producers Project. The Teen Producers introduce us to Jose Ruiz. He's a senior at Crawford's Community Health and Medical Practices School.
My name is Jose Ruiz. I'm a senior at the School of Champs at Crawford. I've been coming to Crawford for about a year and a half now. Before I came here, I was at Arlington High School, which is a comprehensive school. But there, it seemed like I wouldn't notice or anything. There would be times where I had trouble with math, and my math teacher wouldn't be able to help because she had so much grading to do, and then she would also have other commitments. Coming to Crawford at first, I wasn't enrolled in AVID. A teacher noticed my grades, and so she asked me if I wanted to enroll in AVID. Made me feel like I was somebody and I was noticed. Now because of that, I was accepted to CSU Stanislaus. They've shown a lot of support to not just me, but other students. In my case, I became homeless last week, and I had support from the counselor, from our attendance lady, my language arts teacher, basically the whole Champs school. I've had many changes because of Crawford, so I've become more of an outgoing student. I'll be one of the alumni that keep coming back and helping out at Crawford because of my experience I've had here.
We looked at test scores at the 4 campuses at Crawford. All 4 scored among the lowest in the district. According to a school district report, improvement has been inconsistent over the past few years. The school board will make a decision tomorrow about whether to consolidate the campuses. You can weigh in on the conversation by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, and of course you can always email me, jfarian@kpbs.org. And now let's go back to the news desk where Dwayne has a recap of tonight's top stories.
Occupy San Diego moved down to the waterfront this morning. Several dozen protesters took part in an attempted port blockade. At least 4 people were arrested for trying to block port operations. And a University City family is suing the Marine Corps over a jet crash 3 years ago. 4 family members were killed when a Marine jet slammed into their home. The Marine Corps has admitted mistakes were made. You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Before we go to the forecast tonight, we want to show you how things are looking in our East County mountains right now. This is video from our media partner, 10 News, taken out on Mount Laguna. Schools in Julian sent students home early because of the snow today. The move is, or rather, there is more snow expected tonight. And here is a look at the forecast. Have a great night.